In your medical malpractice lawsuit, you sued two different doctors whom you believe were responsible for all of the harms and losses and damages that you suffered. How do you determine which of these doctors are responsible for what percentage of your injuries? Would you like to know the answer? Come join me for a walk through the neighborhood as I share with you the answer to that question. Hi, I'm Gerry Oginski, a New York medical malpractice and personal injury attorney. Okay, so you sued your doctor claiming that he was careless, causing you significant harm and injury. Actually, you sued two different doctors. They were both treating you at the same time. And now you argue that each one was careless and caused and contributed to your injuries. As your case winds through the litigation process, and now after we've had a chance to question each of these doctors, you turn around and say, wait a second, I don't understand. If the doctors and the hospital are all responsible for my injuries, how do we determine exactly what percentage each one is responsible? It's important to understand whether the doctors are employed by the hospital or whether they have their own medical group. And if there is a separate medical group, typically they have their own insurance coverage. So that's an important consideration when trying to determine the different percentages that each one is responsible. So let's say, for example, that we believe your injuries are worth $1 million. And now we think that each of the two doctors involved are responsible equally. If they are equal, we might give a demand to the defense and say, listen, as a global demand, in order to settle this case, we need, let's say, $2 million to settle this case. So do we turn around and say, okay, doctor number one is responsible for 50%, doctor number two is responsible for 50%, and the hospital's not in this at all? No, that's typically not what we do. The attorneys who represent the various people in the case, the various doctors and the hospitals, they will have internal conversations amongst themselves as to what they believe the different percentages are. Doctor number one might only be 30% responsible. Doctor number two might be 30% responsible. And the hospital, for example, they may feel is 40% responsible or something else. For our purposes, when we have a settlement discussion, the defense will come back with a global number usually and say, okay, here we go. You made a demand of $2 million. Now we're going to offer $500,000. And now we can continue negotiations from there. Typically, during settlement discussions, we do not delineate exactly how much each doctor is going to provide or how much the hospital is going to provide based upon the percentage at which we believe they are responsible. Now, all of that goes out the window if this goes to a jury trial. If a jury is asked to evaluate, 6 members of the community in New York are asked to determine whether we are slightly more likely right than wrong than what the doctors and hospital did. At the end of the case, as part of the jury verdict, the jury will have to assign percentages of responsibility, percentages of liability, so that they will determine how much each doctor is responsible for your injuries. They will also determine what percentage the hospital and the hospital staff is responsible for causing or contributing to your injuries. Now, the other scenario is if the doctors are employed by their own private medical group. Now we have to have a conversation during negotiations about where we think each of them fall into that caused and contributed to your injuries. Now we can have conversations with the different attorneys who represent the doctors as opposed to the hospital. And now we can argue, okay, doctor number one did A, B, and C, and it's clear. Doctor number one did A, B, and C, and it's clear, according to our experts, that if he had not done A, B, and C, none of this patient's injuries would have occurred. So we believe that doctor number one is 70% responsible. And now we have a conversation with attorney number two, who represents doctor number two, and now we raise a similar argument, but we say, listen, we believe that doctor number two missed the opportunity to catch what doctor number one did and failed to do so. We believe that this person is responsible for, let's say, 60% of this patient's injuries or something similar. And now we will have ongoing discussions with the defense attorneys about what we believe each one of them are responsible for. In all likelihood, during this conversation or these conversations, both attorneys who represent the doctors will turn around and say, why are you blaming us? The hospital staff lost the opportunities to catch these mistakes. They failed to do X, Y, and Z, And had they caught this in time, none of this would have occurred, or this patient's injuries would have been much less. So that is a possibility, and now we get into specifics during negotiations with each of these to try and get as much as possible. Likewise, the defense will do everything possible to show that their clients, the doctors or the hospital staff, had minimal involvement, and even if they did, whatever they did not cause or contribute to my client's injuries. So why do I share this quick information with you? I share it with you because it's important to understand as you go through the litigation process, for example, in a medical malpractice case, and you say, wait a second, we sued all these people. How do we know which one is more responsible than the other? And does it matter in terms of settlement, or does it matter in terms of going to a jury verdict to let the jury decide? You know, I realize you're watching this video because you likely have questions or concerns about your own matter. Well, if your matter did happen in New York and you have not yet started a lawsuit but are thinking of doing so and still have questions that need to be answered, what I invite you to do is pick up the phone and call me. You know, I answer questions like yours every single day, and I'd love to chat with you. You can reach me at 516-487-8207 or by email at Gerry, Gerry, at Oginski-law.com. That's it for today's video. I'm Gerry Oginski. Have a fantastic day.